Joachim Kroll, the Ruhr cannibal. German serial killer Joachim Kroll began acting on his macabre urges in 1955 and didn't stop for 2 decades. The Ruhr cannibal took at least 14 lives, with victims as young as 4 and as old as 61. His preferred method was to strangle them to death, engage in necrophilia, and then slice off parts of their flesh to eat. Kroll was finally caught in 1976 after police discovered that the intestines from one of his victims had clogged the plumbing in his apartment building. Taken soon after his capture, this photo shows Kroll reenacting one of his murders for the police. The death of Omeira Sanchez. On November 13, 1985, a volcanic eruption sent an enormous mudslide through the village of Armero, Colombia, trapping 13-year-old Omeira Sanchez in the debris. She was immediately pinned down by the wreckage of her own house, with only her head and arms above the floodwaters. For almost 3 days, rescuers tried in vain to free her as she slowly succumbed to gangrene and hypothermia in the water. Finally, on November 16th, she passed away as helpless relief workers watched from mere feet away. Just before she died, photographer Frank Fournier captured this haunting image. Fournier later recalled that he felt totally powerless in front of this little girl, who was facing death with courage and dignity. The Amityville Ghost Boy. Captured inside the Amityville horror house in 1976, this creepy vintage photo remains one of the most chilling paranormal images of all time. After the DeFeo murders, the house's next owner, George Lutz, claimed that the home was haunted and called in famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren to help. One night, the automatic camera they'd set up on the 2nd floor caught what appeared to be a ghostly boy staring back. Some believe it is the ghost of young John DeFeo, who was murdered in the house by his brother years earlier. A chilling message from the lipstick killer. For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself. On December 10th, 1945, William Hirons left this note scrawled in lipstick on the wall of Frances Brown's Chicago apartment. Just before writing this message, Hirons brutally stabbed Brown to death and left a knife sticking out of her neck. Hirons became known as the Lipstick Killer and took one more victim before police finally caught him 6 months later. Inside a mental institution in 1900. Few creepy old photos are more disturbing than those captured inside the mental institutions of decades and centuries past. Seen here is one of countless patients being restrained in a French mental institution in 1900. It's unclear what condition this unfortunate patient suffered from. At the time, people could get committed for anything from depression and shell shock to schizophrenia and learning disabilities. In February 1959, 9 young Soviet hikers mysteriously died while trekking through the Ural Mountains in what's become known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. While their bodies were found mangled in various gruesome ways, including missing tongues and eyes, no cause of death has ever been determined, with theories ranging from secret government experiments to aliens to the Yeti. This creepy photo shows the determined group traversing the harsh terrain just before they met their fate on the night of February 1st. Even though the Russian government reopened the case in 2019, it remains unsolved. The final moments of Keith Sapsford. Keith Sapsford was just 14 years old when he stowed away on an airliner, fell out of the wheel well, and plummeted to his death on February 22, 1970. His harrowing final moments were captured by photographer John Gilpin, who happened to be casually snapping photos while waiting to board his flight. The Australian teenager had just run away from boarding school and longed to see the world. After sneaking onto the tarmac of Sydney International Airport, he hid inside a Tokyo-bound plane. but fell to his death soon after takeoff. "All my son wanted to do was to see the world," his father Charles Sapsford later recalled. "He had itchy feet. His determination to see how the rest of the world lives has cost him his life." Radium girls. Hundreds of young girls and women who worked in American watch factories during the 1920s were exposed to so much radium that they came home glowing in the dark. The prolonged exposure to radium used in the luminous paint that coated the watch faces caused their vertebrae to collapse, their jaws to swell up and fall off, and their lives to slowly end in agony while battling cancer. The exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Anneliese Michel was a devout Catholic teenager living a normal life with her parents in Germany in the late 1960s, but then she began blacking out at school before exhibiting increasingly strange behaviors like routinely convulsing, hallucinating, eating spiders, and even drinking her own urine. Michel claimed to be possessed by the devil, and her parents soon came to the same conclusion. They ultimately subjected her to 67 exorcisms, none of which improved her condition before she died of malnutrition at age 23 in 1976, weighing just 68 pounds. Her story was so disturbing that it eventually inspired the 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. The Pioneers' Defense. Known as the Pioneers' Defense, this creepy historical image was captured in 1937 by Russian photographer Viktor Bulla. While certainly an ominous sight, the men, women, and children depicted here were merely members of the Young Pioneers, the Soviet youth group that was akin to the Boy Scouts. They're seen here donning gas masks during a military preparation drill in the Leningrad area, uncertain of what tomorrow might bring in the years just before World War II, while their home country was seeing waves of death and terror under dictator Joseph Stalin.